advanced care planning. We're really excited about today's panelists because this is focusing more on the medical aspect of the advanced care directive planning, why it's important. Not only do we have Steve Chupp here, who we are very familiar with as kind of the face of Honoring Choices Indiana North Central, but we also have Dr. Mark Sandock, and we're excited to have him as well. He's South Bend native. He's been around here for quite a while, so a lot of his stories and his experience are ingrained in our community. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started, jump right in. We have a lot to talk about today and a lot of really important things to talk about today. So Dr. Sandock, if someone were to be coming to see you as a physician or any physician, what is something that they would need to bring with them?
Okay, thanks for having me. Just as a little background, I'm an internal medicine physician. So I take care of adults from 18 to 110 years old. It's been a privilege of my lifetime to be able to do that. So where I'm talking from is from an adult primary care medicine background. It doesn't take into consideration about pediatrics or OB necessarily, but in general, when you come to the doctor, this is your opportunity to really have a discourse with this physician about the things that are bothering you. So when you leave that, you should really get a much better idea about what the physician thinks about what your symptoms are, what your possible diagnoses are, what kind of tests, x-rays, lab tests might he or she need to do in order to better give them an idea of what the concrete diagnosis is. So we want you to be a full participant in this. You know, you're just not an innocent bystander. This is you, this is your body, this is your life. So I want you to be prepared. I want you to think about what kinds of questions you might have and write them down on a list. Some doctors are afraid of lists, but they shouldn't be, because I think that lists help both you as the patient and me as the physician. When I look at it, I'm more efficient if I can go down line by line what your questions are, and you're going to leave here having answered to all of your questions and had not forgotten any. So I think that you should absolutely bring your questions. If there's a difficult diagnosis or difficult situation, I encourage you to bring a second set of ears. Bring a relative, a trusted friend, somebody that could be there and listen just in case you don't understand something. Maybe your emotions shut you down a little bit. If you hear a diagnosis of a cancer or something. So a second set of ears is always really important. You could look at the internet ahead of time, but I caution you that there's just a lot of crap out there on anecdotal stuff on the internet. So be wise on what you choose, and your physician can help guide you on that as well.
Wonderful. I think that those are some amazing first steps to have things to bring with you. Those questions are so important. Steve, with that being said, some of those questions, let's say you go to your physician and you have the list and you have the questions. If someone were to come to you for Honoring Choices, what's something that they would need to bring with them? Is it similar, the same, or anything different?
Yeah, that's great. I really appreciate being on with Dr. Sandock and appreciate this opportunity. And one of the things that we learn, and my daughter is a nurse, my brother is a physician as well, and we've learned that you really want to be proactive about your own health care and the kind of things that you would like to have happen to you, the kind of care that you would like to receive, especially in the end of life. One of the questions that we answer or ask people to answer in Honoring Choices is, who would speak for you if you could not speak for yourself in a healthcare crisis? If you had a health crisis and were unable to speak, who would speak for you? And we call that a healthcare representative. And what they would do is listen to you and find out what your choices are, what your wishes are. So the important thing to think about is, what would I like to have happen to me in end of life situations? What kind of care would I like to receive? Would I like to receive all extreme measures, or would I have more minimal measures and basically comfort care? And then you'd want to have that in mind in what your values and your goals are for end of life. Those kind of things will set you up very well for any kind of discussion that we would have in preparing a plan for you.
I think that that's wonderful. Something that I'm hearing you both say is really that discussion. And something I would like to keep in mind for anyone viewing this video, any of our community members, beginning that conversation is also such an essential step. So when Steve is talking about honoring choices and what they're able to do, a lot of that is helping facilitate the conversation. And that can help alleviate some of the stress or additional feelings and emotions that may be involved with your end of life planning, is if you have someone there to ask the right questions. So we do really appreciate having this in our community to help guide those questions and then end up with something tangible, those documents filled out. With that being said, what are some of the biggest challenges that you both have faced? Steve, if you'd like to get started, what's one of the biggest challenges that families maybe face in your fields?
I think the biggest challenge is helping families come to a point where they can find the opportunity and the courage to talk about this topic. Lots of times people are a little hesitant to talk about end of life, thinking that, well, if I bring it up, it's going to make everybody uncomfortable, or my family members, are they going to think, well, what do we not know? Is there some kind of pending health crisis? No. Anyone at any age should think about talking about this with their family, and that this conversation, even though it's a little bit difficult, prepare for it ahead of time. And once you broach the subject, you're going to find that people are typically engaged in wanting to hear from you and even offer their own views on what would happen. So one of the biggest obstacles, I think, is the willingness to be able to even broach the subject.
Well, just to jump right in with a comment/question that we received on Facebook, I think that ties really well into the challenge that you just discussed. Does your healthcare representative have to be a family member?
No, the healthcare representative does not have to be a family member. And the healthcare, just to say a few brief words about the healthcare representative, this is somebody who would speak for you only if you were in a health crisis and were unable to speak for yourself. It's someone that you would trust, and someone who would be capable of making those kind of decisions in a crisis like that. And so you would want somebody who is able to maybe think calmly and coolly, who understands your choices, and who is able to follow your choices even if they disagree. That could be a family member, but it might be a trusted friend or someone else outside of your family that you would go to. So that's a great question.
Wonderful. And Mark, to kind of jump off of that, I'm sure as a physician, you've seen all sorts of healthcare representatives. What are some of those challenges that you've seen?
Well, let me even expand on that for just a second, if I could. But as far as the healthcare representatives go, it is so critical that you have this in place, that you have the right person. So I've seen many instances where there's a division in the family, where there's, let's say, 4 or 5 siblings. Some of the siblings have been in California, haven't seen dad in 4 years. Dad has a devastating stroke and it looks like he's not going to make it. That sibling comes in, says, I'm the oldest, I'm going to take charge here. But the others have been here day in and day out, taking care of dad. And let me back up, if you do not have a healthcare representative, there's a hierarchy in Indiana that dictates who makes the decisions. So if you don't have this designated in writing and you are incapable of speaking for yourself, the hierarchy goes to a spouse, then an adult child, and then all the way down. But maybe your spouse isn't the best person to be your healthcare designee. Okay, so if you don't have that, I've seen several instances where there's conflict in the family. And let me also share that if there's conflict and you do not have a healthcare designee, um, people are always going to question after you die, did I do the right thing? Is this what Dad really wanted? Maybe we should have done something else. But if you have it in writing and you've had that discussion ahead of time, it alleviates a lot of guilt, a lot of tension within the family. And just one more thing on that, I've seen people go into financial ruins because they don't have a healthcare representative that can come to a consensus, and people are in the intensive care unit for weeks and hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt when they didn't need to be because their wishes weren't honored.
Well, and to kind of go more into detail with that and to answer another community member's question, what are some of the guidelines or suggestions that you both would have for, to have written down in that document for your healthcare representative? How can you guide a healthcare representative with this document? Steve, would you like to get started on that one?
Sure. While we're talking about this, it's important to realize there are several advance directives, but the number one initial advance directive that we encourage people to consider is the healthcare representative, because it is so important as we're talking about it right now. And it's also very important in the document to do two things. One of them is you want to designate a healthcare representative that you trust and that you talk with to express your wishes to. Secondly, you want to appoint a secondary healthcare representative as well. These are not, you would not do this where each one would have equal say, but one after the other. For example, I've worked with many couples who choose each other as their healthcare representative, but then to have someone outside of that as well, or a secondary, in case the primary is not available. And so that's very important. And then it's very important for a person to talk with all of their family members about their wishes, so that when the healthcare representative, let's say it is a family member who's the healthcare representative, and the crisis happens, and then the person says, okay, this is what Dad wanted. Well, if no one else in the family heard that, that could create some tensions and conflict as well. So it's important to have that discussion and conversation with the whole family. Here is who I've chosen. I'm not playing favorites, but this is the one that I believe is the right person. And yet at the same time, this is what I would like to have happen, so that if anything happens, you are not surprised and you've all heard my wishes. And this is what happened, excuse me, as recently as less than 2 weeks ago in my wife's family, because her grandmother passed away at the ripe old age of 92. She had been 90, excuse me, and she had been living on her own very independently, but experienced a health crisis and within a week was gone. But everybody knew her wishes, and everybody knew who the healthcare representative was. It was her son, and it was beautiful. It was a, quote, what we call a good death, because all of those things were spelled out.
Wonderful. Anything additional, Mark?
Well, and I just want to add that that conversation is really, really important. And many times physicians or attorneys, they don't have time in their daily lives to have the full discussion, and maybe 2 or 3 discussions. It's more than just one discussion oftentimes. And that's where honoring choices, we have trained facilitators that can sit down one-on-one and talk through this whole process. Because one of the jobs of the healthcare power of attorney is to advise family members who may not have even been in that discussion about what really mom or dad's wishes were.
Wonderful. This seems like such a timely conversation to have with the holidays coming up, with everything that's going on in the world. Really, these conversations are so important to begin. And then to have somewhere to go, like Honoring Choices North Central Indiana, it really gives us as community members a call to action, something for us to do to make sure that we can safeguard, and even as a gift for a family member, because that's something that I'm hearing you both express, is that there's a stress and there's high emotion in these situations. And I know from personal experience, we're from the Pacific Northwest, and it was a difficult conversation for my parents to have with with my mom's parents that they were no longer going to be the healthcare representatives, because with a 3-hour time difference, it didn't make sense anymore to have them become the healthcare representative if something happened to my mom or my dad. It really made more sense for my sister and I to step in the same time zone. Even my sister only being about 15 minutes away from my parents and me half an hour, to be closer proximity and to understand what they want, and to really show that as a living document, that as you move and as things transition, your wishes may change. Is that kind of what I'm hearing from both of you guys?
Yes, and if I could just add to that for 1 minute, there's another really important form out there that I think a lot of people are not familiar with, and it's called the POST form. So if you as a patient go into the hospital, your doctor writes an order for your activities, for your medications, for your diet, and what x-rays you're going to get, and everybody in that institution has to follow those orders. But if you have a frail and elderly member in your family, there's something called the POST form. So they may go to the hospital, and they may go to a nursing home, they may go to an assisted living. And this POST form is a physician's order that transfers through the whole medical continuum. So it doesn't matter if you're in the hospital or you're in a nursing home or you're in an independent living. This is a form that is your wishes. What do you want for comfort measures, or what do you want for interventions? Do you want to get transported to the hospital? Do you not want to get transported to the hospital? And it's signed by a doctor. So everybody has to follow those rules. And the state of Indiana is fortunate to acknowledge the POST form. This is another thing that Honoring Choices is very versed at for conversations and to get that documented. And I just want to throw that out because many people are not even knowledgeable about POST.
Now, Mark, should everybody have a POST form?
No, it's only good for people who are old, fragile, elderly, have multiple medical conditions, or whose death would not be unexpected in the next year.
Wonderful. So those distinctions are exactly why we are here today. Especially at my age and being a millennial, knowing what I should get in place is so important for me. And it's something that I think our community members need to understand as well, that this thing that I keep hearing you guys say, if you're not able to speak for yourself. Now that doesn't sound like, oh, just when you die. That sounds like any situation, a car accident, whatever we may face in life where for even a smaller period of time, we're not able to speak for ourselves, someone is there to represent your wishes. Is that what I'm hearing?
You know, that's a great point, because there's many times you don't have to be elderly or dying. You know, if you have an operation and you're under anesthesia, somebody's got to make decisions while you're under anesthesia or coming out of anesthesia. You may have a reaction to a medicine. There's a lot of illnesses where you just get delirious. And I just want to also point out that this whole movement towards advanced directives started with 20 and 30-year-olds. There was a 20-year-old, Terry Schiavo, and Nancy Cruzan, who was 30. One of them was in an auto accident and one had a cardiac arrest. And they were on feeding tubes and ventilators for up to 15 years, waiting for the courts to decide. And this is the advent of advanced directives. The courts were saying if they had somebody that they knew could speak for them, they would honor that. But since they didn't, and they didn't have any advanced directives, 15 years went by. So even the 20-year-olds, the 30-year-olds, we talk to our kids about it, they have the healthcare power of attorney.
And going along with that line, what does this cost? If I want to get these put in place for myself, where would I go? Steve, it sounds like Honoring Choices might be the place, but is there a cost to that?
That's a great question, Elleah, and I'll mention a couple of things about that. First of all, Honoring Choices is here to assist you. We have 35 different trained facilitators who can sensitively have the conversation with you and who are actually volunteers. And so our services are offered at no cost, and we provide this as a service to the community. And we especially encourage working through the healthcare representative form and then the living will. Those are the first two that everyone over 18 should have in place, as we've been discussing. And secondly, you can have these done through an attorney as well, and that's absolutely not a problem. In fact, we would like to work in coordination with attorneys, because many people will complete their advanced directives, such as a healthcare representative form or the living will, but they will complete it in the office and not tell anyone. Here's a bit of an anomaly that I think we need to address. You can actually appoint in Indiana a healthcare representative, and you can do this with us or with an attorney, and they will never know that they were appointed, because the form does not ask them to sign. And so, especially if you do this in an attorney's office, which is fine, be sure to have the conversation with people afterwards to notify your healthcare power of attorney, both that they were selected, if they are willing, and also what your wishes are. But for us, these are free services. We provide these many times and really appreciate the opportunity to do that with community members. And we serve especially those in Elkhart, St. Joe, and Marshall counties.
And especially with the audience that's watching today, there's apps for the phone that you can download your or upload your healthcare power of attorney and your living will, your post form if you have one, and so that you carry it with you all of the time. And I have all my loved ones on there too. So if I'm in New York and my loved one, my dad, for instance, went in the emergency room here, I was able to fax his living will directly to the emergency room from my telephone when I was in New York. And so there's apps for the Android and the iPhone that you can have all the time.
And of course, Dr. Sandock, there are other places as well that you'll want to file those. You especially want to file those with your physician, with your healthcare system, with your hospital. The one that I learned of more recently that's really important is in your car, that you have copies. You can make copies of these. The copies are equally valid as the originals. Make copies, put them in your car so that any first responders can see what your wishes are as well.
And we have another community member, audience member question as well. So Mark, you kind of explained the more specific pieces of the post form. What does that stand for? And then where can you access that form?
Well, it stands for, and different states have different pseudonyms for it. So we're the POST, some of them are MOST. So it's Physician Order for Life Sustaining Treatment, POLST. You can get all of these forms on the Indiana Gov website that's in our website. You can print them off on your own and sign them. But what I want to suggest, and I want to really emphasize, it's the conversation with the people that are so important to you, besides just the signing of the documents. There's something that many of you might know is called the 5 wishes, about what do I really want for the quality of my life when I'm ready to die? Do I want prayers to be said at my bedside? Do I want a certain song? Would I like massage? Who would I like to be there? Who don't I want to visit me? And these 5 wishes are available. And we went through these 5 wishes with my mom, and it really puts the flesh on the bones on the living will. So, it enhances your opportunity to talk to your loved ones about what's really important to them.
Just to add a little detail there, the website for Indiana is the Indiana State Department of Health, and they actually have a section there for advanced directives.
Now, do you recommend that I go online by myself and just download these documents and try and figure it out? Or how do I get started? Who should I contact first? Or do I do it by myself?
I would not recommend doing it by yourself, because it's not that complicated and it's not that difficult. But again, these conversations are terrific to be able to have together. And At Honoring Choices, we have, as I say, 35 trained facilitators who can sensitively and thoroughly work through those documents with you and answer any questions that come up about those. So we would be happy to help you with that. You can contact us. My email will appear here in the chat as well, or in the notes. And so we encourage you to do that. Anyone can fill these out on their own, but it really helps to have a conversation with a trained facilitator in order to complete those.
And we have brochures and we have forms in Spanish and in English. And especially during this COVID time, we can do this virtually by Zoom. We don't have to do it in person. So we're geared up to come to you and help you no matter where you're at or what you need.
Wonderful. And to just finish up with a few audience member questions, it sounds like we're going to need a part 2 on this to delve more into some of the questions that we have. But what was the app that you guys had mentioned to be able to store these documents?
Well, I'll tell you the one that I use, and it's called Mind Your Loved Ones, and it's MYLO for short.
MYLO.
MYLO. It's co-sponsored by the American Bar Association, and we have, but I'm not an advertisement for them, okay? So there are other ones. That just happens to be the one that is pretty robust and has a lot more medical information than just your advanced care planning, if you want to have it.
Wonderful. And then another piece to just finish up kind of what the audience members are saying, because I really want to make sure we clarify some of these pieces. One of the audience members said that they agreed that the conversation is important, but that they think that it needs to be written down, because if we don't die for many years after you have the conversation, will everyone remember what is said? What I'm hearing from you both is that this is more of a living document, if you will. So if I myself get this filled out through Honoring Choices, and a couple years down the road, I get married and I have a child, my priorities might change, right? Would I come back to you and have another facilitated conversation? Can I just redo the documents? Are they done like that?
Yes, that's a great question. And the documents are they're not static. They can be changed. They can be replaced at any time. Now, granted, if you choose, for example, maybe you get married or a spouse passes away and you need to choose another healthcare representative, all you need to do is create another form, and we would be happy to help you with that, especially if you have any questions. However, you want to make sure that wherever you have that file, you want to replace the previous one. So with your physician, your healthcare representative, on your app, however you do that, you just want to make sure that you put the most recent document. But these are very important to be reviewed every 5 to 10 years, especially.
Anything to add, Mark?
You know, I don't think so. I know Steve had you know, he had about 4 or 5 Ds or something where you change things. But yes, as long as you are retaining your capability to speak and to think, then you can change that anytime, right up to the minute that that a decision has to be made. But yeah, that's a great question.
It really sounds like there's no reason why I shouldn't get them filled out right now. Is that right?
Right, and as long as you've had that discussion, if you get married, you know what the nuts and bolts of those discussions were. And so you could then just change it on a form, but you would want to bring that other person, your new husband or your new wife, into the discussion. And that way, maybe you would have call Honoring Choices and say, could you have another limited conversation with my new healthcare representative? You know, so that we're all on the same page on this.
Well, thank you both so much. I'm going to wrap this up because we're right around the 30-minute mark. We're definitely going to be doing a part 2 of this because you guys have just so much information that we just scraped the surface on. So I appreciate you both being here today. And for our community members, look at the links below in the comment section. It'll have resources to be able to contact Honoring Choices North Central Indiana. Thank you so much, Dr. Sandock, for your insight. I think some of those stories in particular with situations that are not so easily gone through without these documents really helps highlight the need for these. And keep in mind as well, community members, that we are going into the time of the year where family might be getting together, even virtually now. And if you do have a loved one that you're able to connect with, Honoring Choices sounds like they will be there to help facilitate that conversation. Is there anything else that you, Steve or Mark, would like to say before we sign off?
Well, I just know if there's a part two, I've got quite a few other stories that reinforce the need for this, and also from a physician standpoint, how I dealt with the families that we did this. But you know, the time constraints are such, but if there's a second, I'd be more than happy to share those on a second.
It sounds like we could do a whole series on that, because I think those are the situations that really are the call to action for us. It really puts into perspective why we need to do this. So thank you so much, Dr. Sandock. Your expertise is always appreciated. And Steve, you know, we've loved having you on our lives, and to continue with that and offer such a resource to our community members. Thank you both so much.
You're welcome.
With
Thank
that,
you.
I will,
Thank you.
yeah, I will log off today. So if you have any additional questions and the live has finished, feel free to continue to comment below. We will keep up to date with those. And then reach out to Steve or Dr. Sandock in regards to any questions that you might have, and look out for a part two. Make sure to like our page, and then that will notify you when the next live happens. Thanks so much.